Vishakam Vipamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dhinapando Chudapate Kopesha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gaurani Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishakana Sukhe Devi Pranami Hari Priye Panchakalparupyascha Kipasindhubheva Padikam Bhavadevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 4, text number 14. Chapter 4, text 14. We read the Sanskrit all together. We need books to read it together. Text 14, chapter 4. Namam karmani limpanti name karma pales priha iti mamyo vijanati karma birna sapadyate. There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruits of reactions of work. Text 15. Evam gyatva kritam karma purvar apiva mukshabhi kuru karma eva tasmatvam purvai purvataram kritam. All the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding and so attained liberation. Therefore, as the ancients, you should perform your duty in this divine consciousness. Text 16. Kim karma kim karmeti kavayopyatra mohitaha tate karma parvakshami yajgatva mokshase shubhat. Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all sins. Text 17. Karmano yapi bodhavyam bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha akarmanas cha bodhavyam gahana karmano gatihi. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. Text 18. Karmanya karmaya pasyed akarmani cha karmaya sabodhiman manusheshu sayukta kritsna karma krit. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Text 19. Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjitaha jnanagni dagdha karmanam tam ahu panditam buddhaha. One is understood to be in full knowledge whose every act is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker whose fruit of action is burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. Text 20. Tyaktva karma pala sangam nitya tripto nirashrayah karmanya bhibravrito pi naiva kinchit karoti saha. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruit of action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. Text 21. Nirashiryata chittatma tyakta sarva parigraha shariram kevalam karma kurvanapnoti kilvisham. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. Text 22. Yadrichalapa santushto tonbatito vimatsadaha samasiddha vasidha cha kritapi na nibadyate. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady both in success and failure, is never entangled although performing actions. Text 23. Tatta sangasya muktasya jnanavastita chetasaha yagyaya charata karma samagram pravaliyate. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. In text 24. Brahmarpanam brahmahavir brahmagna brahmanahutam brahmaivatena gantavyam brahmakarma smadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So we can go to text 14. We'll read the translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Text 14. There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruits of reactions of work. Purport. As there are constitutional laws in the material world stating that the king can do no wrong, or that the king is not subject to the state laws, similarly the Lord, although he is the creator of this material world, is not affected by the activities of the material world. He creates and remains aloof from the creation, whereas the living entities are entangled in the fruit of results of material activities because of their propensity for lording it over material resources. The proprietor of an establishment is not responsible for the right and wrong activities of the workers, but the workers are themselves responsible. The living entities are engaged in their respective activities of sense gratification, and these activities are not ordained by the Lord. For advancement of sense gratification, the living entities are engaged in the work of this world, and they aspire to heavenly happiness after death. The Lord, being full in himself, has no attraction for so-called heavenly happiness. The heavenly demigods are only his engaged servants. The proprietor never desires the low-grade happiness such as the workers may desire. He is aloof from the material actions and reactions. For example, the rains are not responsible for different types of vegetation that appear on the earth, although without such rains there is no possibility of vegetative growth. Vedic Smriti confirms this fact as follows. Nimittamatram evasa srijyanam sarga karmani pradhana kadani bhuta yatovai srijya shaktaya. In the material creations, the Lord is the only supreme. I don't know, there's a fly every time I sit up here, he loves me. The created beings are of many varieties, such as the demigods, human beings, and lower animals, and all of them are subject to the reactions of their past good or bad activities. The Lord only gives them proper facilities for such activities and the regulations of the modes of nature, but he is never responsible for their past and present activities. In the Vedanta Sutras, it is confirmed that the Lord is never partial to any living entity. The living entity is responsible for his own acts. The Lord only gives him facilities through the agency of material nature, the external energy. Anyone who is fully conversant with all the intricacies of this law of karma or fruit of activities does not become affected by the results of his activities. In other words, the person who understands this transcendental nature of the Lord is an experienced man in Krishna consciousness, and thus he is never subjected to the laws of karma. One who does not know the transcendental nature of the Lord, and who thinks that the activities of the Lord are aimed at fruit of results, as are the activities of the ordinary living entities, certainly becomes entangled himself in fruit of reaction. One who knows the supreme truth is a liberated soul fixed in Krishna consciousness. Maharaj, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Sometimes people accuse the Lord of making so many atrocities, earthquakes that cause so much destruction, and they use their own judgment of so-called karmic activities, as an ordinary person might be punished for, at least for his negligence, if not for personally wanting to harm others. But God can't be judged like that, because He's all good. He doesn't have any faults. By nature, He's faultless. He's pure. He doesn't act in any way that's mundane. It's not influenced by goodness or passion or ignorance. It's totally on the spiritual platform. Then they say, well, if He gives living entities the choice to do everything themselves, why does He let them do wrong things? He sets a trap for them. He puts traps out. And then they fall in the trap, and then He gives them, and He punishes them. But that's not a correct understanding either. He's not trapping them. He's not trying to keep them in the material world, any more than any good family wants to keep their children in the prison. I've never seen any good family thinking, I'd like to send my son goes to a nice prison. No, they say, I hope he goes to a nice university and lives in a nice suburban home. So if even ordinary people, ordinary man, ordinary animal, if they want the best for their children, they're trying to protect them, why would God then have this flaw? Why would He be so flawed that He would cause others to suffer? This is a completely wrong conception of God. Without understanding that God can't do any wrong, how can He be judged by the people? He's working for the people's good. What they might think was illegal is not illegal. It's his special ability to do things for the benefit of all living entities. And God is so perfect that He never does anything that is wrongful to anyone. The system He's set up of karma. Karma for those who act on the rebellious way, they don't act in accord with law. And they have to come down to the world of karma, akarma, and vikarma. Karma means action that should be performed. Vikarma means action that should not be performed. And akarma is action that's transcendental, has no reaction. This is explained. It's a little difficult to understand because sometimes word akarma seems to have another meaning when one doesn't do anything. But his not doing anything doesn't mean he's free from karma, actually. For example, if one sees someone light a fire to a building and then he goes away and that person doesn't tell the authorities, then he's guilty of withholding important information. As a citizen, it's his duty to tell the truth and try to help the government, help the state take care of its people. So, inaction doesn't always mean there's no reaction. If one doesn't take some action to protect his children from harmful people, and he gets reaction for that, he's punished. They take him to court and they say, you had these children and you didn't protect them properly. Now we're going to punish you. And in the state of God, so the two things here are being described. How the living entities are not subject to karma themselves. One, if they're acting on the transcendental platform, there's no karma for them. And two, if they understand how the Lord acts, always transcendental to the three modes of material nature, then they're also free from Janma karma chamedivam, Janma karma chamedivam, evam yo vedi tatvata, chakvadeham punarjana, naikimamiti sorjana. One who knows the transcendental nature of the Lord, his activities, his appearance, does not take birth again in the material world, but goes back to the abode of the Lord. That's why reading Bhagavad Gita is not just an ordinary activity when you read some newspaper or some novel or some even book of encyclopedia. It's not that you can be freed from the cycle of birth and death by reading that. You can read all kinds of stories and still have to suffer the karmic reactions. But if one understands Bhagavad Gita, that understanding is given by the Lord. So if the Lord is pleased that this person is trying to hear about me, he's trying to understand me, then he showers him with blessings. He sends him a spiritual master who will guide him, will take care of him, lead him back to home, back to Godhead. All good fortune comes. So one has to make that effort. One has to take that step. Sometimes people, they say, I'm studying and I'm scrutinizing very carefully before I make my decision. That's good, scrutinize, but the activities that you're being asked to perform in devotional service couldn't even hurt you on paper. No, there's nothing there that's harmful. Chanting the names of God, that's in every devotional literature. Acting for glorification of God. Glorifying God, that's there in every faith, every religion. Keep clean. don't have adultery, don't steal. These are good things that are in line with. So what is anyone being asked to do in devotional service that he could think might be misleading? You may say, what about worshiping idols? One scripture says if you worship idols, you should be severely punished. And the other says it's okay. No. The explanation is that if one worships the form of the Lord as authorized by the Lord and saintly persons, then there's no sin. He's not misdoing using his invent. He's doing the right thing. And if one destroys the deity of the Lord thinking that this is just an idol and it shows envy of God by worshiping something with form, when God has no form, that's also another mistake. God has form. And if one knows what that form is, then he can worship properly. Panchakshiki system, and make spiritual progress.
Thank you, Maharaj. In the Sri Upanishad says Om Pranamada Om Pranada Pranamadam Pranat Pranamujatchiche Pranasya Pranamadaya Pranamiva Vishishyate. That the Supreme Lord is perfect and everything emanating from Him is perfect. So therefore this whole material world is perfectly designed because it's emanating from the Supreme Lord. Which Srila Prabhupada mentioned that the Lord creates, but He's aloof from this creation. Whereas the living entities are entangled in the fruitive results of material activities because of their propensity for lording it over material resources. I was just thinking about this point of karma. Actually earlier, I was chanting japa, I was looking at a bee. And the bee is just going after flower, after flower, after flower. A bee's life, there's no breaks, only work until death. Unless you're the queen bee, then it's a little different, but so then I thought, how does this situation arise? So the Lord is fulfilling the living entity's desire to do a certain task, to have a certain way of operating in the world, to receive sense gratification and pleasure and trying to lord it over. But the Lord is so perfect that He designs a system that no matter what you do, you have to be subservient to the whole. So, animals, being in lower species of nature, they can't break the laws of nature. So they're helpless to act according to what they're given, their duty. So therefore, the bees, the beetles, the birds, they're all doing their certain task, and it's in harmony with nature, which, it's always a competition, but there's some kind of balance there. But the human is given this facility for higher states of consciousness, and we can choose willingly or unwillingly, higher or lower states of consciousness. Somebody can't even do the basic necessities of human life, to take care of themselves properly, to be free from intoxication, to deal with their problems, to help those they're responsible for. Then why would they be given a human life in the next birth? It's like they're preparing for a lower species of life. So this human platform is very important. In that same Sri Upanishad, Prabhupada makes the point that the point of human life is to solve all problems. Not just, this little problem, how am I going to pay my rent, how am I going to do this, how am I going to, but all of our problems, which ultimately is being stuck in this material world, just going back and forth, to and fro, to all different corners of this material ocean, or material world, trying to find the right fit that's gonna put us in the center and bring enjoyment for us that will never end. But this is illusion, it never comes. Only by putting the Lord in the center and glorifying the Lord, then the living entity can become pleased. As we hear in the Bhagavatam, how it describes the process of devotional service, how one can render devotional service to the Lord, get causeless knowledge and detachment of the world, and all the way to becoming fixed and enlivened in a transcendental state which is beyond the modes of material nature, in which way he sees oneself and one's master. One becomes a Goswami, a master of his senses. He's not dictated by the material energy around him. And the reason why is because he sees his master, he sees the Lord who's aloof from it. And that's what Krishna is saying exactly right here. There's no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruit of reactions of work. So if we understand the Lord's position and follow suit of what he's trying to speak to Arjuna, we can also come to that platform. And as Maharaj mentioned this shloka a few back, I'll just read the English. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, or Arjuna. So Krishna is beginning a portion where he's speaking on the nature of karma. And alternative to karma, or what's beyond karma, is transcendence. So he's giving hints and clues which are pretty direct, but if we take to Krishna consciousness and make Krishna the front and center of our life, working and serving him, then we can rise above these modes of material nature. What does Krishna say? He says, Sagunan samatitaitan brahmabhaya kalpate. What's the first two parts? Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate. Sagunan samatitaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. That by rendering devotional service to the Lord, that's concentrated, that's fixed, that's steady, then one immediately comes over these modes of material nature. Modes of material nature are, as Maharaj pointed out, people don't want to send their child to a prison. But some of us have a prison cell with gold bars, silver bars, iron bars, or, kind of mold, and we shouldn't be excited because we're in a fancy prison cell. It's still prison. And every prisoner usually wears an outfit, like a costume that signals that they're a prisoner. Similarly, we have the body. So because we have this material body, which is lump of ignorance, only the consciousness, the soul, is actually there providing life for it. This is a symptom of our disobedience to the Lord. That it's a prison suit. But as we engage in the devotional service to the Lord, everything that's engaged in his service becomes spiritualized. So just naturally, by taking up devotional service as prescribed by the acharyas and the parampara and the scripture, then our whole life will become completely revolutionized and spiritualized. Prabhupada often makes this point that we don't need to change anything, we just need a change of consciousness. As we put Krishna in the center and try to please Krishna's senses rather than serving our own senses, then this frees us from all of our miseries in the material world. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparidvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchite. All these designations and roles we like to play. They have a saying, there's a guy who's got a different task, he wears many hats. This is all of us, we wear many hats, we have many different roles, many identities. But by taking up devotional service, none of these identities will hold up in the course of that fire. What's the word that Krishna used? He said, Jnanagni, the fire of perfect knowledge. I'll just read this whole shloka. It's text 19. He says, one is understood to be in full knowledge whose every act is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker whose fruit of action is burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So, coming from this material conditioned state, we need knowledge. Knowledge to convince us of the Lord's greatness, and that we are insignificant to the Lord, and that we should render service to the Lord. And as one has that perfect knowledge, then naturally you can see, whenever I do an activity for a selfish motive, it brings pain, it brings a reaction, it brings a problem. But when I act on behalf of the Lord, it's purposeful, because it's sat, it's connected with reality, eternity. Whereas any other actions are just in vain, just lost in the course of time. So we need to cultivate knowledge to engage ourselves fully, to keep our intelligence sharp of why we're doing what we're doing. But on a higher stage, one may even have to renounce this knowledge so they can just give the best loving devotion to Krishna. But we need to know where we're at. So as a conditioned soul, knowledge is very, very important. Transcendental knowledge, that is. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments? If not, we can read some more. Yes, Prabhuji.
I've heard this argument a lot by atheists, that they say basically like God already, He created the living entity with free will, and who never misused the free will. But then we know that obviously that the living entity, he can choose to not misuse his free will, or he can also choose to misuse it. But how do we avoid falling victim to this mentality that God is okay with everything, therefore what do I have to do? Everything is divine, everything is everything is good, right? God is totally okay with everything, so therefore why should what do I have to do? He allowed it to happen, therefore so how do we avoid that mentality?
So I was thinking about this shloka here, text 14. Krishna says that he's transcendental, and if you know his transcendental nature, you become transcendental also. If you want to break it down. So on the flip side, if you're worshipping God and you don't know about his transcendental activities, and you don't know what that's like, then you could think, okay, I go to the temple, I love God, and He wants me to be happy, He wants me to enjoy, He wants me to go snowboarding, He wants me to go parasailing or scuba diving. Because He wants me to be happy, right? So we do anything that we want. So we have to understand our compromised position in the material world and see that certain activities are sources of suffering versus sources of liberation. So it takes transcendental knowledge to understand, what is liberation and what's not liberation, that we're in an entangled position. Because we can really do whatever we want to do, and put some fancy words behind it, just to make it seem okay what we're doing. But this is a science, and it's a systematic process for understanding the nature of reality, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending how you see it, certain actions create certain results. So some people are akin to this Mayavad philosophy where there is no good or bad. There's no sin. It's just an action. It's only a mental concoction of why I think something's bad or good. But Krishna, he says, Yashastram vidam uchucha vartate kamakadata Nasa siddham avapnoti na sukham na param gatim. One who disregards the scriptural injunctions and acts according to his lusty own ways, he attains neither happiness nor perfection nor the supreme destination. So, first and foremost, whatever we're following, whether it's Mayavad or Vaishnavism or whatever, Shastras have to be the foundation. Because we can never get over that relativity. Because I could go in one culture in the world and they do a certain activity, and then you go to another culture and they do that same activity, and that's like completely wrong. Like you do that there and they just like, everybody looks at you like you're crazy and, you know, like yells at you and spits at you. But you do it the other place and it's like normal. These are relative truths. So we need to approach the absolute truth. Well, then that brings up, you know, this, what is good, what is bad. I mean, really, some people believe that there is no sin, there is no bad activity, it's just an action. But then, you know, they strive to act in a particular way. But if they were to go rape a woman or do something, it's like, what makes that wrong or right? My point is that I'm making is, you know, if we poke and scratch a little deeper, usually these people who present such philosophies don't have a grasp of even what they're talking about. And they have no sense of like where morality comes from. Why we do certain activities and it feels right and it feels purposeful, and we do other activities and it feels wrong. If somebody wants to like twist their mind around, you know, using this jnana to like agitate their mind in such a way where they think that they could rape a woman and it's like not sinful because whatever reason, because they don't believe in sin, like that takes so much work and is so unnatural for clearly something that's so heinous. So my point, I guess, that I'm making is morality, it comes from God, it comes from the scriptures. God is describing what's right or what's wrong and how to act properly. So when one has proper knowledge of what he's showing in the scriptures as provided by the acharyas, it becomes crystal clear. These activities are sinful, these activities are pleasing to the Lord. Then we should never be disturbed by others who share such philosophies, because we should be convinced in our own way what we're doing is proper. Like what Maharaj was saying, I was thinking it was really nice. That everything we do in Krishna consciousness is totally legit. I mean, we're chanting the holy names, we're glorifying the Lord, we're worshipping the Lord, we're studying the scriptures. Of course, maybe there's activities in between, like, you know, cutting the grass or cooking or washing the dishes, which requires like a little bit of extra something to see how it's devotional, you know. But look what we're making the basis of our life, and it's not like it's some speculative idea, it's all given by the Acharya. The Acharya is free from these wacky ideas, you know, that we can do whatever we want. Prabhupada came to America in the midst of the hippie movement, when it was all free sex and free drugs. And he's the only person that stood up and said, no sex, no drugs. He didn't say no sex, he said, you know, sex within marriage, or regulated, but essentially. But those who were wise took to that, and those who were pious enough to hear, who had the adhikari. Those who didn't, they didn't, and they missed out. And what do? They continue on with this idea of what you're saying, you know, you can just float around and do whatever we want and it's all good. But a devotee, due to his own realization, and with the happiness and distress, can see the true equality of all beings. So you could elaborate a little bit more on that purport, as like by your realization of seeing actually the reactions of the material world, and being situated in a transcendental platform, being completely convinced and sure of where you're going, then you could see that this person's not acting in accordance with that, and how are they going to escape the modes of material nature because they're confined within it. So I guess I'm trying to share more ways to see how somebody who presents such a philosophy is not so sound in their understanding of life, rather than trying to, defeat them and show them why it's wrong. But I like to mention this point often, is that I forget who, but it was, I think Socrates. In this culture, when there's intelligent people, they would engage in debates and lectures. And his philosophy, that was, if he was engaging in a debate, he would just question and question and question. And eventually you question and question and question, and usually the person's philosophy falls apart because they have no clue what they're talking about. So, especially somebody with knowledge who can ask pinpointed, targeted questions. Yeah, these people's philosophy will fall apart, and ultimately it comes down to, I want to enjoy. I want to enjoy, and I don't want to surrender, because surrender to God means surrender. It doesn't mean you do what you want in the name of God. Prabhupada was mentioning something at this that made me think of this point in this purport. I forgot what he said, but anyways, I hope that's helpful at all. Something else you want to say?
Yeah, it was nice. It seems like a lot of people are stuck on they're fixated in this conception that God is wrong, because like you said, they want to remain as the enjoyer. So they're not willing to see. They just keep this idea that, because evil exists, God is wrong. He whatever, something. But they're not able to see the value in the material world or these sinful activities. So my question is, what is essentially the value of the material world and sinful activities and evil or these kinds of things? What's the meaning? What's the value?
The value of the material world?
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada called the whole material world an anartha. I could elaborate, but that sums it up. The whole material world's unwanted, like Maharaj said, it's a prison. It's a prison. Good position, bad position, prison. Not free. Controlled. Why are we controlled? Because we're trying to be a controller. So when we're confronted with things that takes us away from being the controller, we rebel. Whether man, whether woman, whether dog, cat, whatever it is, we rebel. I mean, like horses, before they're like a natural, not natural, but a trained up horse, who's order and able to walk in a big crowd and not move so violently and be disturbed by so many people. They have to be broken. It's not that they willingly just do that and it's a fun job. My point is that all of us are being broken by the modes of material nature, but we are under illusion thinking that we're in the controller. I mean, what's the value of something that has no sustenance? It's temporary. So we're talking about something from our point of view in our life. Oh, the world seems so big. I've lived 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. And what I'm taught about in history is going back, for human civilization, 3,000 years, 5,000 years, 10,000 years. What they teach in schools is what I mean. And then, you look at the earth and the mountain formations and geological and how much does that go back? Million years, millions of years to, their speculative idea on the Big Bang, which is however long. Point being is, whatever that is completely meaningless if you put it side by side of eternal reality. Eternal. So whatever we achieve here is temporary, except for whatever we do in devotional service for the Supreme Lord. This is the Lord's guarantee that whatever we do in devotional service is never lost. So ultimately, we have to come face to face with this. I say this as like the whole process and understanding, but more specifically, face to face with God. But yeah, we have a Creator. He is perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm created by Him. And my position is to serve Him. But for a lot of us, that confronts us and it makes us want to run that way and that way in the form of a dog or a cat or a bird, so I can be free. I can spread my wings and be free. What freedom is there? I remember it's like just after I graduated high school, I was looking outside my window and I saw these birds and I was like, man, these birds got it made. They're free. They don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to get a job and work. They don't have to worry about like social anxiety, They just like flap their wings and look pretty and, do some tweeting and, everything works out. But for a human, there's like so much pressure and anxiety. I got to do this. I got to do that. What do these people think of me? I'm just like, man, it'd be so much better to be a bird. That's freedom. This is tamogun. Literally tamogun, that we'd rather be envying a bird's position rather than seeing the true position of reality, where only the human can understand that this is a compromised position. It's that of suffering, and the point of it is to get out because it's temporary. So whatever we can do here connected to Krishna has value. Whatever that's not disconnected to Krishna, no value. You want to say something more?
So it's a little bewildering that, the living entity who uses his free will to run away from Krishna is useless, and the material world is useless. I mean, it's true, they're useless. Just like a part of a machine that's gone, like a little screw. It's just useless. What do you do with that? It's useless. But it's bewildering to think that such a useless. Why such a useless aspect of reality even exists in the first place? So I guess it's hard to wrap your mind around.
Well, in one sense it's useless, in one sense it's completely useful. Just like I just mentioned, when things are engaged in service of the Lord, useful. When it's not engaged in service of the Lord, useless. So from our perspective, from the individual, it's useless because we're uselessly wasting our time trying to make ourselves God. Whereas Durga, who's controlling the material world, Kali, she's a servant of the Lord. So she's doing her service, so therefore the material world is useful because it's fulfilling a certain purpose as the prison to reform the conditioned souls, to show them that this is not the normal way of living. So whatever there is in the Lord's creation, we always have to see is all perfect because it's coming from Him. So Om Pranadam Pranamidam Om Pranamada Pranamidam Pranat Pranamudachite Pranasya Pranamadaya Pranameva Vashishyate. Everything emanating from the Lord is perfect because He's perfect. So therefore, this world is also perfectly designed to act the way that it is also. But it's a matter of consciousness. I forget where, we were reading a couple weeks ago, months ago, sometime, Prabhupada was talking about what separates the material activity and spiritual activities, the consciousness. So if we see Krishna in everything, Krishna says, I'm never lost to that person, and he's never lost to me. So therefore, we see everything in relation to Krishna in the material world, then it connects us to Krishna, and then it's a source of us to be free from this world. There's this shloka in the Bhagavatam that's saying that when somebody's pricked by a thorn, sometimes you have to use another thorn to prick out that thorn. So it's like we're in a compromised position. But if we don't see Krishna and everything, then we're going to be enamored by the modes of material nature. Oh, this looks attractive, that's so great, oh, I'll stay away from that. But, And we're just being pushed and pulled by Maya. Gunas, tied up by these ropes, pulling and tugging us at all different angles. As conditioned living entities in this material world, we live so many lives and we have so many desires deeply embedded in our heart. Before we take the devotional service, we think we know exactly who we are in a material sphere. I listen to this kind of music, I think this way, I like this sport, I like this activity, this is me. But then when we take the devotional service and Sarva Upadi Vinirmuktam, all these upadis start dissolving. Sometimes we could be confronted with desires that are deep within our heart, that weren't so actively in the foreground of what we're aware of. And sometimes these can be very alarming. Because it's wow, before devotional service, I didn't experience such lust or such temptation or such things. It's because we were always satisfying that urge in our own controlled way, but it's always controlled by the material energy. So as we take the devotional service and we start fighting against this, then sometimes these deep thoughts and residual things deep in our consciousness will manifest. So it's important to stay steady with our devotional service. That's the saving grace. Whether we're happy, unhappy, I'm elated, I'm depressed, the service continues, and the more we make the service the foundation of our life, it's exactly what it is. It's a foundation to stand on. Whereas in the material world, there is no foundation, because there's the three gunas, and they're always competing for nature. Krishna says these gunas are always competing for supremacy. So that's my point is, we come in from a certain background, and we think, I act like this, and I do like this, and I would never do such things. But then, these gunas are always fighting. We can never think too highly of ourselves to think that, this person's a crackhead living on the street, or this person's, like a prostitute, sleeping with everyone. I would never do such things. The longer we stay in the material world, we'll do everything, trying to enjoy. So, and we can never think that it won't happen to us. But best course of action for us is to follow the acharyas, because they've crossed over this material ocean. We're beyond it. And then they act in a way to show us how to act with the proper mood. Always being humble, always being dependent upon the Lord. And Lord Brahma, who's at the top of the parampara, he prays to Krishna. Tate nukampam susamikshamano punjana evatmakritam vipakam hridvag bapurbir badatan namaste samuk shiveta yamukti pade sadayabak. We have to go on tolerating the past reactions of our sinful activities, of our karma. Always glorifying the Lord with our mind, our body, and words. In this way, liberation is our rightful inheritance. And not just any liberation, but liberation in relation to Krishna. So, I'd like to end here. Thank you everybody for their participation and hearing, tolerating me. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai, Shri Shri Gauranatai, Ki Jai, Vansakalpatarubhyas Chakvipasinabhyeva Chapatitanam Pavanibhya Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.